The advertisement had been perfect. A quiet, two-bedroom apartment on the second floor of a four-story building, recently renovated, surprisingly affordable for this part of the city. I'd jumped on it. My new landlord, a pleasant, somewhat flustered man named Mr. Henderson, assured me the third floor was currently vacant. No worries about noisy neighbors above you for a while, he'd chuckled, handing me the keys. It was exactly what I needed after months of living in a place where every conversation from next door felt like it was happening in my living room. I spent the first few days reveling in the silence, unpacking boxes, arranging my sparse furniture, feeling a profound sense of peace. The building was old, built in the 1920s, with high ceilings and heavy, solid walls. I thought I'd finally found my sanctuary. That peace lasted about a week, until the sounds started. It was subtle at first, just a soft, rhythmic thudding, like something being placed down, then picked up, then placed down again, muted, as if through a thick carpet. I figured it was the building settling, or maybe some distant construction. The sounds were always intermittent, never lasting more than 10 or 15 minutes. But then, they evolved. The thudding became more distinct, almost a soft dragging. It sounded like it was directly above my bedroom. I remembered Mr. Henderson's words about the vacant third floor and tried to dismiss it. Maybe he'd rented it out sooner than expected. I'd just missed the memo. I tried to convince myself this was normal apartment living, but the timing was always off. Late at night, sometimes early morning, never during the day when regular moving would happen. One night, it wasn't just dragging. There was a faint scratching sound mixed in, like nails on plaster or something rough being pulled across a wooden floor. It was accompanied by a soft, almost imperceptible sigh, a sound so ephemeral I questioned if I'd truly heard it. My heart rate picked up. This wasn't building settling. This wasn't construction. This was something. I pulled my phone out and sent Mr. Henderson a text asking if the third floor had been rented. No reply. I waited a day, then called him. His voice was bright, unapologetic. Oh, no, still empty. Been a slow market for the larger units. You know. Why do you ask? Everything all right? I mumbled something about hearing things, probably just the old pipes. He laughed, a bit too loudly. Old buildings, right. Plenty of creaks and groans. His cheerfulness didn't make me feel better. It made me feel worse. If the third floor was empty, what was making those sounds? I started paying closer attention. The scratching was more frequent now, sometimes rapid, like an animal scrabbling, sometimes slow and deliberate. And the dragging, it had a new quality, a heaviness. I imagined something large being moved, something cumbersome and resistant. I considered asking the neighbors on my floor, but I hadn't really met anyone yet, and I didn't want to be the new tenant complaining about ghosts on my first week. My sleep began to suffer. Every bump, every creak, every groan from the old building was amplified, my ears straining to discern the source. One afternoon, the sounds became undeniable. It was a rhythmic thumping, like someone striking the floor with a closed fist, dull but insistent. Boom, boom, boom. It went on for nearly an hour. This wasn't some subtle scratching. This was deliberate. I walked to the window, looked up at the third floor unit. The windows were dark, curtains drawn, no sign of life. I thought about going upstairs, knocking on the door, but a chill ran down my spine. What if Mr. Henderson was telling the truth? What if no one was there? What if something else was? The thumping stopped as abruptly as it began, leaving a ringing silence that felt heavier than the noise. I started checking online, looking up the building's history. It was old, yes, but nothing remarkable. No reported deaths, no strange incidents, just a solid, unremarkable apartment block. I found a tenant forum, a small, rarely updated page. Most posts were about parking or overflowing bins. One older post, however, from a few years back, caught my eye. Anyone else hear strange noises from the third floor, Unit 3B? The user asked. There were a couple of replies. Yeah, Thought it was just me, and always late at night, right? The conversation died after that. No solutions, just shared unease. It wasn't just me. Other people had heard it. But why was Mr. Henderson so insistent the unit was empty? My fear escalated from vague unease to palpable dread. I couldn't stand it anymore. I had to see for myself. One evening, after the familiar dragging and scraping started up again, a low, guttural sound accompanying it, I crept out of my apartment. The hallway was dim, the air still. I climbed the stairs, each step echoing too loudly in the silence. The third floor landing was even darker. Unit 3B. The door was plain, painted a dull grey. I stood there, heart pounding, listening. Through the thick wood, I could hear it clearly now, a distinct, rhythmic scraping, wet and heavy, like something being dragged across concrete, not carpet. And then, a soft, choked whimper. Not human, something else. I pressed my ear against the door, holding my breath. The sounds intensified, a frantic scraping, then a sharp, wet snap, followed by a desperate gurgling that cut off abruptly. Silence. Absolute, suffocating silence. I pulled back, terrified, my mind racing. What had I just heard? Who was up there? What were they doing? I fled back downstairs, my legs shaky, locked my door, and called the police. I told them everything, the sounds, Mr. Henderson's denial, the forum posts. They arrived, 2 officers, and listened patiently. Then one of them, a tall woman with tired eyes, looked at me gently. "Ma'am," she said, "there's no 3rd floor in this building. It's a 2-story residential unit. Your apartment is on the top floor. The 3rd floor was the attic space, designated only for maintenance, a low-ceilinged crawl space above my unit." Mr. Henderson hadn't been lying when he said it was empty. The dragging, the scratching, the whimpering, it had been coming from below me, from the 2nd floor, from my floor, and I was the only tenant in this building. They found the body the next day in a locked storage closet in my own apartment, the one I'd never bothered to open. Thank you for listening. If this story found you in the dark, subscribe and turn on notifications. A new tale waits every night.